The crisp morning mist of Seattle was lifting from Puget Sound as the public market came alive. Rose Sterling, 76, carried a wicker basket, appearing as an unassuming grandmother. Few knew she founded Sterling Gourmet, a successful culinary empire. She returned often to stay grounded and taught her grandson Andrew that true character is shown by how one treats those who can offer nothing in return. On that same spring morning, Claire Bennett was walking through the crowded aisles with a faint shadow of sadness in her gentle hazel eyes. She had just walked out of yet another exhausting corporate job interview and received the same dismissive response she had grown accustomed to over the past few months. At 32, Claire possessed an impressive university degree in business administration, a sharp mind, and a strong work ethic. Yet the professional world seemed blind to her potential. Refusing to let despair paralyze her, she took a deep breath, adjusted her jacket against the chilly breeze, and decided to walk down to the market stall owned by her parents to help them carry heavy crates of seasonal fruits. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered by the aggressive screech of tires as a highly polished luxury vehicle pulled up next to the crowded walkway. From the passenger seat stepped Victoria Sinclair, dressed in expensive designer clothing, wearing dark sunglasses, and carrying an expression of absolute impatience and disdain as she surveyed the scene. Victoria's private driver honked the horn repeatedly, trying to force a path through the dense crowd. The sudden sound completely startled Rose Sterling, causing her to lose her balance on the wet cobblestones. Her foot slipped. Her wicker basket flew out of her hands and crashed to the ground, scattering her fresh vegetables across the dirty walkway, while Rose fell awkwardly, with a sharp gasp of pain. "Oh my goodness, my leg," Rose whispered, her face tightening as she tried to push herself up, her elderly joints trembling. Several nearby shoppers stopped and turned to look, but a heavy silence filled the air as nobody stepped forward to help. Victoria Sinclair walked closer, her brow furrowed with irritation, far more concerned with the inconvenience to her schedule than the elderly woman on the ground. "Lady, you really ought to be much more careful where you are walking," Victoria barked, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Some of us actually have important places to be and business to attend to today." Rose slowly lifted her tired eyes to look at the wealthy young woman standing over her, maintaining calm and grace despite the pain. "I am truly sorry, my dear," Rose replied softly. "The sudden loud noise of your car horn startled me, and I simply lost my footing on the damp street." But Victoria was far from finished. Her eyes narrowed as she looked down at Rose's simple, worn clothing with obvious contempt. "At your advanced age, people like you should really stay safely at home resting, rather than coming out here to cause unnecessary disruptions for everyone else," Victoria sneered. Suddenly, a calm, firm, and fearless voice resonated from directly behind her. "That is absolutely no way to speak to another human being, and you know it." It was Claire Bennett, who had immediately dropped her own bags the moment she witnessed the fall, and rushed forward through the crowd, without hesitation to kneel beside the shaken elderly woman. "Are you all right, ma'am? Please take your time. Do not try to rush up if you are in pain," Claire murmured softly, carefully placing a supportive arm around Rose's shoulders. "I think I am mostly all right, my sweet girl," Rose replied, a wave of gratitude washing over her face as she looked into Claire's kind eyes. "Thank you so much for stopping to help an old woman." Victoria stared down at Claire with surprise and mocking amusement, crossing her arms. "Oh, how absolutely charming. Now we have someone playing the grand hero, defending complete strangers in the middle of the street," Victoria scoffed. Claire took a deep, steadying breath, refusing to let anger dictate her response, though she was determined not to let this cruel behavior pass unchallenged. "I am not trying to be a hero," Claire said, looking directly into Victoria's cold eyes. "I am simply stating that this lady deserves basic human respect, regardless of who she is or what she is wearing." Victoria let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "You do not even know who this woman is," She could be absolutely nobody for all you know, so why waste your precious time? Claire looked tenderly back at Rose, then stood tall, her voice carrying across the square. She could be someone's mother or someone's grandmother, and just for that reason alone, she fully deserves our utmost respect. For several long seconds, the entire public market fell into profound silence, as Claire's powerful words resonated with the onlookers, causing several people to look down in shame for their inaction. Rose observed the young woman closely, her wise eyes seeing straight through to Claire's soul, recognizing instantly that there was no hidden motive, no greed, and no desire for praise in her actions. There was only pure, unconditional human kindness. Victoria merely smiled with bitter contempt, adjusted her expensive sunglasses. Well, we shall certainly see exactly how far that wonderful kindness of yours actually takes you in the real world, Victoria spat out sharply, before turning on her high heels and walking back to her luxury car. Claire completely ignored the departing vehicle, turning her full attention back to Rose, carefully helping the elderly woman to her feet before kneeling back down to gather every single scattered vegetable from the dirty ground. She then walked over to a nearby stall to purchase a fresh, cold bottle of water, handing it gently to Rose and staying closely by her side until she was certain the elderly woman's breathing had returned to normal. "My dear child, you have completely ruined and dirtied your beautiful shoes, just to help me clean up this mess," Rose said, pointing down at Claire's footwear with genuine concern. Claire offered a warm, reassuring smile. "Shoes can always be easily cleaned and washed, ma'am, but a human being who is genuinely in need of help does not always find someone who is willing to stop their busy life to lend a hand." Rose felt a deep surge of emotion welling up within her chest, a feeling that was rare after so many years in the superficial business world. "Why are you doing all of this for me?" Rose asked softly. "You do not know my name, you do not know where I come from, and you have no idea who I am." Claire shook her head gently, her expression filled with sincerity. "I do not ever need to know who someone is, how much money they have, or what their social standing is, in order to treat them with basic human decency and kindness." That powerful, simple phrase settled deep into Rose's memory. She thanked Claire one final time and slowly made her way toward her waiting driver. Later that same evening, inside the magnificent Sterling estate overlooking the city, Andrew Sterling received his grandmother with a face full of worry. "Grandmother, what on earth happened today? Did you seriously go out to that crowded public market all by yourself again, without telling anyone?" Andrew asked, rushing over to help her into a comfortable armchair. Rose smiled gently up at her 35-year-old grandson, patting his hand reassuringly. "I am completely fine, my dear boy. But I must tell you that I learned an incredibly profound lesson about human nature today." Andrew raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly did you learn today, grandmother?" The elderly woman looked deeply into her grandson's eyes, her voice filled with quiet, reflective weight. "Today I crossed paths with two entirely distinct types of human beings. One of them possessed immense elegance, an abundance of material wealth, and a terrifying amount of pride. The other individual was clearly facing her own difficult hardships and possessed almost nothing of material value. Yet she possessed something that is becoming terrifyingly rare to find in this world: a truly beautiful, good heart." Andrew listened in thoughtful silence, his mind on his own painful past. After losing his parents young and a devastating betrayal during a business crisis, he had grown deeply cynical about people's motives. Despite his success and wealth, he felt profound loneliness. When the business recovered, people returned professing loyalty, but he doubted their sincerity. Rose noted that a beautiful house serves no purpose without sincere people to share it with. Andrew resisted, but Rose insisted she worried about his lonely heart. Andrew admitted it was hard to trust. Rose reminded him that one selfish person does not mean everyone will abandon him. It was in that exact moment that Rose thought of Claire, the young woman at the marketplace who had shown such profound, selfless kindness without having any clue about her wealth. "I met someone entirely different today," Rose said, her eyes shining with hope. "Someone with a genuinely sincere heart." Andrew listened carefully, though in that precise moment, his mind was focused on another woman he had recently started spending time with. Victoria Sinclair was an incredibly elegant, confident, and highly admired woman within Seattle's elite social circles, and Andrew truly believed that someone of her high status might finally be capable of understanding his complex business world. He decided it was time to formally introduce her to his grandmother. The very next afternoon, Victoria arrived at the Grand Sterling residence, her heels clicking sharply on the polished marble as she looked around the entryway with a critical, evaluating gaze. "It really is a rather lovely house, Andrew," Victoria murmured, a slight hint of disapproval in her voice. "Though I must say, quite a few of these traditional decorations are incredibly outdated, and something far more modern and sleek would suit someone of your high social standing much better." Andrew did not pay much attention to the comment, but as Rose walked into the grand living room, she recognized that sharp, arrogant voice instantly. It was the exact same woman from the public market, the very same individual who had treated her with such absolute cruelty when she falsely assumed Rose was just a destitute old woman. "Good afternoon," Rose said, her voice calm, measured, and entirely devoid of fear. Victoria turned around, and the very moment her eyes landed on Rose, she froze entirely in place, her expensive purse slipping slightly in her hand, as her face turned completely pale with shock. "You?" Victoria whispered, her voice trembling. Andrew looked between the two women, his expression filled with profound confusion. "Wait a moment. Do the two of you already know each other?" Rose took a deep, steady breath, her face showing no anger, but rather a profound, quiet disappointment. "Yes, my dear boy. This is the exact person I spoke to you about last night. This is the woman who judged my entire worth as a human being because she truly believed I was absolutely nobody of importance." Andrew turned his gaze toward Victoria, his jaw tightening as he waited for some form of explanation. "Andrew, please, you have to listen to me," Victoria stammered, her usual composure completely shattering. "I had absolutely no idea that she was your grandmother." That single, desperate sentence said infinitely more than any elaborate explanation could have conveyed to Andrew's sharp mind. "And what if she wasn't my grandmother?" Andrew asked, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet, stern tone. Victoria stood completely paralyzed, unable to find a single word to respond. Andrew realized with profound clarity that this was not merely a case of someone having a bad day. This was the true, unfiltered nature of how Victoria acted when she believed nobody of importance was watching. Rose spoke up softly. "The kind of respect that depends entirely on the size of a bank account or the prestige of a family name is not true respect at all. It is merely manipulation." Victoria tried desperately to reach out and touch Andrew's arm, her voice filled with panic. "Andrew, please. It was just a misunderstanding. I can change. I can prove to you that I can be different." Andrew stood perfectly still, remaining completely silent for what felt like an eternity. For a very long time, he had actively ignored several small warning signs in various relationships, simply because he was so deeply terrified of being left completely alone in the world. But on this transformative day, he finally understood a vital truth. Choosing to stay with the completely wrong person out of fear was just another, much more painful form of absolute loneliness. "I truly hope, for your own sake, that you do change, Victoria," Andrew said finally, his voice entirely resolute and devoid of anger. "But I cannot continue this relationship with you any longer." Victoria gasped, her pride deeply wounded. "Are you seriously breaking up with me over one single tiny mistake?" Andrew shook his head with profound sadness. "Because that single mistake exposed a dark part of your true character that I simply have no desire to see in my life." Victoria gathered her things and stormed out of the grand estate, her eyes burning with pure humiliation. That night, Andrew sat quietly by the fireplace, and Rose gently placed a loving hand on his shoulder. "Do not close your heart to the world because of this, my boy." Andrew sighed heavily. "I am just so tired, grandmother." Rose smiled softly. "I know you are. But you must never permit one bad experience to rob you of the beautiful opportunity to find something genuinely good." The very next afternoon, while Andrew was driving through the city, his mind still heavily occupied by the intense events of the previous evening, his luxury vehicle suddenly developed a severe mechanical issue, forcing him to pull over onto the side of a street located directly near the exact public market where everything had initially begun. While he was waiting impatiently for roadside assistance to arrive, his eyes wandered across the bustling street, catching sight of a beautiful, quiet scene unfolding directly outside a small produce stall. A young woman was patiently helping an elderly lady lift several incredibly heavy packed grocery bags, guiding her carefully down the steps without seeking a single glance of public attention, completely without expecting any reward, acting purely because another human being was in genuine need of assistance. Andrew found himself smiling without even realizing it, his heart skipping a beat as he recognized the gentle, focused expression on the girl's face. It was Claire Bennett. For the first time in a very long time, Andrew Sterling was about to interact with someone who would speak to him as a human being, completely oblivious to his wealthy family name, his massive company, or the immense financial empire he had built. As Andrew watched the elderly woman walk away, shouting back her heartfelt thanks, he took a deep breath and decided to cross the street to approach Claire. "Good morning," Andrew said kindly, stepping into the shade of the awning. "I couldn't help but notice what you just did for that lady." Claire turned around, wiping her hands on her apron, and offered a warm, bright smile. "Oh, helping with a few heavy bags? That really should be a completely normal thing for anyone to do," she replied cheerfully. That simple, grounded answer caught Andrew entirely off guard, challenging his cynical view of the world. "You are completely right," he murmured. "Though unfortunately nowadays, what should be normal seems incredibly difficult to find." The two of them naturally began to talk as they stood by the stall, with Claire under the complete impression that he was simply an ordinary driver experiencing a frustrating day with his broken car, and Andrew thoroughly enjoying the refreshing simplicity of a conversation where he could just be himself. "What kind of work do you do?" Claire asked curiously. "I work in the food and supply business," Andrew replied smoothly, keeping the details intentionally vague. Claire let out a soft laugh. "Well, that sounds exactly like the kind of answer given by a person who really doesn't want to explain too much about their job." Andrew laughed genuinely, a sound that felt entirely foreign, yet incredibly wonderful, after so much time spent guarding his words in corporate boardrooms. Claire also opened up about her own life, sharing that she had worked incredibly hard to earn her degree in business administration, and was actively searching for a real corporate opportunity. But in the meantime, she was more than happy to help her parents run their market stall. She did not speak of her current situation with a single ounce of shame or regret. Rather, she spoke with a quiet, beautiful pride that deeply moved Andrew. "Working hard to help my family has never given me a single moment of shame," Claire said thoughtfully. "The truly difficult thing in life isn't starting from the absolute bottom. The real tragedy is forgetting exactly who you are once you finally manage to reach the top." That profound statement struck a deep chord within Andrew's heart, echoing the very values his grandmother had tried to protect within him. Claire then passionately shared her ultimate dream of one day opening her very own small, honest grocery shop, dedicated to providing high-quality fresh produce. A place where people could shop with complete trust, especially the elderly residents of the neighborhood, who desperately needed extra care, patience, and closeness. "I don't need a massive, flashy supermarket," she explained softly, "just a truly honest place." Andrew had crossed paths with countless ambitious individuals throughout his corporate career who possessed massive, elaborate business plans, but very few ever spoke with such deep, undeniable sincerity. When the veteran local mechanic finally arrived to fix his car, Andrew felt an unexpected pang of disappointment, realizing that he desperately did not want this beautiful conversation to come to an end. Over the course of the next several weeks, Andrew found himself returning to the public market multiple times, creating simple excuses just to see Claire and talk to her. Slowly but surely, a deep, beautiful bond began to form between them, as they got to know each other's minds. What neither of them could have ever imagined was that Rose Sterling would soon discover, through a casual conversation with her grandson, that this incredible young woman was the exact same person who had saved her on the market street. The wise, elderly woman felt a profound sense that the invisible threads of destiny were intentionally weaving their paths together, and she decided it was finally time to invite Claire to their home to reveal the entire truth. When Claire formally arrived at the magnificent Sterling residence following a special invitation, she stood completely frozen in the grand foyer, her eyes wide with absolute astonishment as she took in the sheer scale of the wealth around her. This luxurious estate did not seem to belong in any way to the simple, fragile elderly woman she had lovingly helped up from the cobblestones weeks prior. The moment Rose walked gracefully down the grand staircase, Claire's breath caught in her throat as the pieces of the puzzle instantly fell into place. "Mrs. Rose, you actually live in a place like this?" Claire asked, her voice filled with sudden, sharp confusion. Rose walked forward, gently taking Claire's trembling hands into her own warm palms.
"Yes, my dear child. There is a very important explanation that I owe you."
Rose openly confessed that the massive Sterling Gourmet Corporation belonged entirely to her family, and that Andrew was her beloved grandson. Claire stepped back slightly, a sudden wave of hurt crossing her face as she misinterpreted the situation. "So, everything that happened, it was all just a test to see if I was a good person." Rose shook her head with deep, sorrowful earnestness. "No, my sweet girl. Absolutely not. This beautiful home is simply a part of my family's history. But when I am out there walking the streets of the market, I am still just Rose, not a wealthy family name." Andrew stepped forward into the room, his eyes filled with desperate sincerity as he looked at Claire. "When I first approached you by your parents' stall, I had absolutely no idea that you were the incredible woman who had protected my grandmother. Everything that we shared, every single conversation we had, was completely real, Claire." Claire looked deeply into Andrew's eyes, seeing the raw honesty reflecting back at her, though her independent spirit still required time to fully process this massive revelation. Rose, wishing to show her immense gratitude, offered to financially assist Claire's parents with their business, but Claire firmly and politely declined the generous offer. "I cannot accept gifts like that, Mrs. Rose," Claire said softly, but with absolute conviction. "If I do, I will always feel like my simple act of kindness that morning was turned into a calculated transaction." That incredible response caused Rose's admiration for Claire to reach unprecedented heights. Andrew understood completely that Claire was a woman who never needed to be rescued. She simply deserved a fair opportunity to shine. Therefore, when he brought up her dream business plan again, he presented a completely different proposal. It would not be a charitable gift at all, but rather a formal, legally binding business investment where Claire would maintain absolute creative control and make every single major decision herself. After careful consideration, Claire accepted, and thus, Claire's Roots was officially born. As weeks turned into months, Claire's Roots opened in a vibrant neighborhood near the market. It was not the largest store, but every person who entered felt a warm sanctuary, where names mattered, and kind conversation was guaranteed. Claire arrived early every morning, inspected produce, spoke with farmers, and prepared deliveries for elderly neighbors. For her, the business was a way of caring for the community. A customer told her, "People don't just come here to buy tomatoes. We come Because you look us in the eye and ask how we are doing. Andrew often watched her with admiration, knowing the shop thrived because of Claire's patience and kindness. One quiet evening, after closing the shop for the night, the two of them walked hand in hand through the historic streets of the city, eventually stopping at a small, dimly lit coffee shop far away from the prying eyes of high society. It was exactly the kind of simple, genuine setting that Claire preferred. Sometimes I still find it incredibly difficult to believe all of this is real, Claire confessed softly, looking down at her coffee cup. The store is wonderful, but I am actually talking about the two of us. Andrew looked at her tenderly, reaching across the table to take her hand. Why do you say that, Claire? Claire paused for a few seconds, her eyes searching his. Because our two worlds are just so completely and utterly different, Andrew. Andrew understood her deep-seated fear perfectly, because he too had spent the vast majority of his adult life constructing massive emotional walls around his heart to protect himself from being hurt. Yet, Claire had slowly and patiently taught him an entirely new way of looking at life. Not every single person who enters your life comes with the intention of taking something away from you, she had told him gently during one of their long talks. Some people genuinely just want to stay and love you. That beautiful phrase had brought a profound, lasting peace to Andrew's soul that he hadn't experienced in many years. However, while they were quietly building a beautiful, sincere future together, Victoria Sinclair was watching their happiness from a distance, her heart completely consumed by a toxic, bitter resentment. She simply could not accept the reality that Andrew had managed to find genuine joy and fulfillment in the arms of such a simple, ordinary woman. Staring intensely at a photograph of the happy couple published in a local community newspaper, Victoria's eyes narrowed as she muttered maliciously to herself, "A low-class girl like her actually believes she can just slide in and take my rightful place. She has absolutely no idea what I am truly capable of doing to protect my pride." Victoria immediately initiated a cruel, calculated smear campaign against Claire, utilizing anonymous accounts to spread vicious rumors across various social media platforms and elite local circles. The malicious rumors falsely claimed that Claire was nothing more than a highly manipulative gold digger who had strategically used a fake display of humility at the market to trap the wealthy sterling heir, and that her entire business was nothing but a vanity project funded by Andrew's blind infatuation. Sadly, some customers began to look at Claire with distinct suspicion and coldness when they walked into Claire's roots. One afternoon, a skeptical customer openly asked, "Is it actually true what everyone online is saying about your true motives here?" Claire felt a sharp pang of emotional pain pierce her heart, but she maintained her absolute calm and dignity, looking the woman in the eye. "That depends entirely on what you choose to believe," Claire replied softly. "If you want to know how I truly work, you can easily ask the neighbors who see me here every single morning at dawn." The customer looked around the warm shop, witnessing the local elderly folks waving affectionately at Claire, and realized instantly that cruel rumors rarely reflect the actual truth. When Andrew discovered the disgusting campaign Victoria was running, he rushed to the shop, his face red with pure outrage. "Claire, this has gone entirely too far. You cannot simply sit back and allow her to destroy your beautiful name. Let my corporate lawyers handle this immediately." Claire shook her head with an incredible, quiet strength. "No, Andrew, I don't want the world to believe in my honesty just because I have a powerful, wealthy man standing behind me with lawyers. I want them to believe in me because they truly know who I am as a person." The highly anticipated day that was meant to formally bring the Sterling and Bennett families closer together finally arrived, taking place at the beautiful, historic Sterling estate. It was not designed to be a massive, flashy, high-society gala, but rather an intimate, cozy family dinner, where everyone could comfortably get to know one another on a deeply personal level. Claire's parents, Teresa and Julian, arrived at the grand house feeling a mixture of profound excitement and natural nervousness. They had spent their entire adult lives working tirelessly under the open air of the public market, and they never could have imagined that their precious daughter would one day be building a beautiful life with a member of one of the most prominent families in the entire state. However, the moment they stepped through the front doors, Rose Sterling did everything within her immense power to make them feel entirely at home. Please, let us leave all family names, titles, and social standings right outside the front door tonight, Rose said with a beautiful, welcoming smile. Tonight, we are simply one united family sharing a meal together. Those comforting words instantly washed away Claire's lingering anxieties, reinforcing her realization that a true family is never constructed out of money, but out of mutual respect. Yet, completely unbeknownst to the joyful family gathering inside, Victoria Sinclair was finalizing her absolute last, most desperate attempt to completely shatter Claire's life. She knew that the malicious online rumors had completely failed to destroy Claire's solid reputation, so she decided to launch a direct attack against the one thing Claire valued above all else: her absolute honesty. To execute this dark plan, Victoria had tracked down Ian Carter, a young, vulnerable high school student who occasionally worked part-time, helping out at Claire's grocery store. Ian's family was currently navigating a catastrophic financial crisis, as his mother was battling a severe illness, and their medical debts were piling up rapidly. A desperate situation that Victoria easily discovered and ruthlessly decided to exploit. Victoria cornered the young boy, offering him a massive sum of cash that would easily pay off all his mother's immediate medical bills. But in exchange, he had to secretly slip an incredibly expensive diamond bracelet into Claire's personal purse during the family dinner. When they inevitably discover the bracelet hidden in her bag, everyone will finally see her for the thief she truly is, Victoria whispered coldly, pressing the jewelry into his hand. Ian looked at the glittering bracelet with extreme hesitation, his heart pounding. But Miss Claire has never stolen a single thing in her life. She is so good to me, he protested. That doesn't matter at all, Victoria snapped. You just do your job, if you want to save your mother. Driven entirely by a desperate, heartbreaking desire to help his sick mother, Ian initially accepted the money and the bracelet. However, as he slowly walked toward the grand Sterling estate that evening to perform the dark deed, his conscience began to tear him apart. He vividly remembered every single instance where Claire had treated him with immense respect, how she had personally packed extra food boxes for his family, and how she always encouraged him when others completely ignored his existence. Tears streaming down his face, Ian realized he simply could not go through with it. Instead of hiding the bracelet, he begged to speak with Andrew privately right before the dinner commenced, breaking down completely as he confessed the entire disgusting plot and handed over a secret audio recording of Victoria threatening him. When Andrew listened to the shocking audio, a volatile mixture of intense rage and profound guilt washed over him. All of this terrible danger came into Claire's life simply because of my past connection to Victoria, Andrew said, his voice shaking as he looked at his grandmother. But Rose firmly placed a hand on his arm to ground him. No, my dear boy, every single human being is entirely responsible for the specific harm they consciously choose to inflict on others. Do not carry her guilt. Andrew wanted to cancel the dinner immediately and cast Victoria out, but Rose shook her head wisely. If we stop her now, she will simply bide her time and find another, more dangerous moment to strike. Sometimes, a lie must be permitted to speak fully in the light, so that everyone can clearly recognize its true face. The beautiful family dinner proceeded exactly as planned, with Claire remaining completely unaware of the tense undercurrent, while Andrew and Rose stood fully prepared to protect her. Suddenly, the heavy dining room doors opened, and a cold shock rippled through the room as Victoria Sinclair walked in uninvited, her face masked in a flawless facade of deep concern. Please, forgive my sudden intrusion into your lovely family gathering, Victoria said smoothly, her eyes locking onto Claire with a predatory gleam. But I believe this prestigious family deserves to know the absolute truth about the person they are welcoming in, before they make a catastrophic mistake. Claire stood up from her chair, completely bewildered. Victoria? What on earth are you doing here? Victoria let out a heavy, theatrical sigh, pointing a finger at Claire's chair. My incredibly valuable diamond bracelet mysteriously vanished from my vanity case today, and I have solid reason to believe we should immediately search this young lady's personal purse. A suffocating, intense silence fell over the grand dining room. Teresa instantly stood up, fiercely gripping her daughter's hand. My Claire would absolutely never touch something that does not belong to her. How dare you accuse her? Victoria merely smiled with ice-cold satisfaction. Well, that is exactly what every proud parent says right before the ugly truth is finally exposed to the world. Claire felt a profound, heavy ache of sadness in her chest as she realized the sheer length to which this woman would go to hurt her, but she bravely refused to lower her gaze or show fear. When I first met this beautiful family, I possessed absolutely no money, no high social position, and no power, Claire said, her voice clear and incredibly steady. But I have always possessed my absolute dignity, and I will not allow you to steal that from me. Victoria stepped closer, gesturing aggressively. If you are truly as innocent as you claim to be, then you shouldn't have a single issue letting us open your bag right now. Before the situation could escalate any further, Rose Sterling stood up from the head of the table, her presence commanding absolute authority. Victoria, I strongly advise you to think incredibly carefully about the exact actions you are taking right now. Victoria tossed her hair back arrogantly. I am simply trying to show you who she really is, Mrs. Sterling. The wise elderly woman let out a long, quiet sigh filled with pity. In that case, let us go ahead and listen to the absolute, complete truth. Andrew calmly stepped forward and produced his smartphone, pressing a button that allowed Ian's secret recording to play loudly through the high-quality speakers of the room. Victoria's own unmistakable voice instantly filled the grand dining room, loudly revealing every single detail of her malicious plan, the diamond bracelet, and her explicit intention to completely ruin Claire's life. The undeniable truth lay entirely exposed for everyone to see. For the very first time in her life, Victoria Sinclair found herself completely stripped of any clever lies or prepared defenses, her face turning an ash-gray color as she looked around the room. Ian Carter then stepped out from the hallway, looking directly at Claire with tears in his eyes. I am so incredibly sorry, Miss Claire. I originally took her money because I was so desperately worried about my mother's health, but I realized I could never do something so terrible to you. You are the only person who always treated me like a real human being. Claire's eyes overflowed with warm tears, not because of the cruel accusation, but because she was deeply moved by the young boy's ultimate honesty. Andrew looked directly at Victoria, his voice filled with absolute finality. For a very long time, I allowed the painful wounds of my past to dictate my decisions. But Claire beautifully taught me that there still exist genuine people who are truly capable of loving without conditions. You have completely lost, Victoria. Victoria lowered her head in absolute disgrace, realizing she had destroyed her own life, and swiftly exited the estate. Julian, Claire's father, spoke up with a calm, beautiful serenity. Material wealth will never make a person inherently good or bad. It is the human heart alone that decides that. Rose walked over and warmly embraced Claire. True families aren't always born exclusively from the same bloodline, my dear. Sometimes, they are beautifully born because good people consciously choose to protect and respect one another every single day. Claire looked into Andrew's eyes, realizing that through all these intense trials, she hadn't just found a beautiful love, she had found a true home. Several peaceful months quickly passed, following that intense, dramatic evening, and life in the vibrant city of Seattle beautifully returned to its calm, natural rhythm. Claire's roots, continued to experience wonderful growth, becoming a beloved staple of the neighborhood. But the single thing that most consistently surprised new visitors who entered the shop was that Claire Bennett remained absolutely, completely unchanged by her massive success. She still arrived at the store at the exact same early morning hour, greeted every single local neighbor by their first name, and spent extra time helping the elderly citizens carry their goods. Her hard-earned business success hadn't altered the fundamental nature of her heart in the slightest degree. It had simply provided her with a much larger platform to share her beautiful kindness with the world. One sunny afternoon, a regular customer smiled as Claire placed some fresh fruit into her basket. "Claire, after absolutely everything you've been through, didn't you ever feel tempted to change who you are?" Claire paused, offering a warm smile. "Changing myself to constantly improve as a professional is important, yes. But I will never, ever change the foundational values that allowed me to get here in the first place." Those inspiring words eventually reached Andrew, who was standing quietly near the back office, watching her work, his heart filled with a profound sense of gratitude. For a massive portion of his life, he had aggressively overprotected his heart from the outside world, until Claire beautifully demonstrated to him that choosing to trust again was actually its very own form of profound bravery. Not every single human being you cross paths with comes with the intention of causing you pain. Some incredible people arrive solely to help you remember exactly who you are meant to be. Their beautiful relationship continued to blossom naturally, without any unnecessary rush, anchored deeply in the simplest, most meaningful things in life. A long, quiet talk after a busy day at work, a warm family dinner, or a peaceful weekend walk along the waterfront. For Andrew, these simple moments possessed infinitely more value than any luxury yacht or high society event ever could. Meanwhile, Victoria Sinclair was forced to quietly confront the severe real-world consequences of her toxic choices. Word of her cruel plot quickly spread through the close-knit business community, causing many prominent individuals who once admired her perfect image to distance themselves completely. For the very first time in her privileged life, she was forced to look at herself in the mirror without any wealth or status to hide behind, accepting the hard truth that her primary issue had never been Claire, but rather the bitter person she had allowed herself to become. Months later, she sent a long, sincere letter of apology to the shop. Claire chose to completely forgive her in her heart, though she wisely understood that true forgiveness did not mean allowing a toxic person back into her private life. Real peace always required healthy boundaries. One beautiful golden afternoon, both families gathered together once again at the grand Sterling residence for a special celebration. This time, there were absolutely no lingering secrets, no doubts, and no fears present in the air. There was only a large dining table overflowing with laughter, beautiful memories, and genuine smiles. Rose Sterling sat quietly at the head of the table, watching Andrew and Claire share a happy laugh, her heart filled with a profound sense of fulfillment after so many years of worrying over her grandson's loneliness. After the wonderful meal, Rose and Claire walked slowly through the blooming gardens together. "Do you know something, my dear girl?" Rose said softly, looking out at the flowers. "I still vividly remember every single detail of that chaotic morning at the public market." Claire smiled warmly, gently holding the elderly woman's arm. "I do too, Mrs. Rose, though I never could have ever imagined the incredible journey that simple morning would spark for all of us." The wise matriarch stopped walking, turning to look deeply into Claire's eyes as she took her hands. "On that fateful morning, you did not step forward to defend me because I carried a wealthy, powerful family name. You fiercely defended me simply because, in your eyes, I was a human being who needed help." Claire felt a profound, beautiful wave of emotion wash over her entire soul as she listened to those deeply meaningful words, realizing the immense ripple effect a simple act of love could create. "I genuinely only did what I believe any decent human being should have done in that situation." Claire responded softly. Rose smiled beautifully, a tear of joy in her wise eyes. Perhaps that is exactly why it was so incredibly special, Claire. Because countless people had the ability to stop and help me that morning, but you were the only one who actually chose to stop your life to do it. Later that evening, Andrew found his grandmother sitting quietly in the library, looking through an old album of family photographs. Grandmother, it seems that at the very end of the day, you successfully found the exact perfect person you always wanted for me, Andrew said gently, leaning over her chair. Rose shook her head slowly, a wise smile gracing her lips. No, my dear boy, I didn't find absolutely anyone for you. I simply did my best to help you keep your heart open, so that you would be capable of recognizing her when she finally appeared. Andrew looked out the large window toward the garden, where Claire was laughing happily with her parents under the warm patio lights, and he understood with absolute clarity that his grandmother was completely right. The true, undeniable wealth of the Sterling family had never actually resided within a multi-million-dollar corporation, a massive estate, or a prestigious family name. It had always resided within the hearts of the genuine people who consciously chose to love, respect, and look after one another every single day of their lives. Years later, when asked the secret of her success, Claire always pointed back to that spring morning at the market. She chose to help an unknown elderly woman without knowing who she was. The smallest acts of compassion often open the largest doors of destiny. Money can buy materials for a house, but only pure human love and mutual respect can transform it into a true home. This story reminds us that the value of our lives is measured not by what we accumulate, but by what we choose to give away. In a world obsessed with material wealth and status, it is easy to lose sight of the quiet truths that sustain the human spirit. True wisdom teaches that facades of grandeur are fragile. What remains is the legacy of how we treated one another when we thought nobody important was watching. Kindness is not weakness. It is the expression of a courageous soul that chooses to remain soft and loving in a cold world. Every act of unconditional love plants a seed that grows into unexpected joy when we need it most. We must treat every elder with reverence, remembering they carry the wisdom of generations. A fulfilled life is achieved not by reaching the top alone, but by reaching out to pull others up, creating a sanctuary of love, trust, and shared humanity that money cannot buy. At the end of our journeys, the moments that truly mattered were those quiet mornings where we chose to stop, kneel down, and extend a hand of pure love to a fellow human being in need.